Welcome back to One Fair Review, everyone. I'm your host, Grant, as always, and today, I thought we were going to start this year off with a banger, talking about a Netflix original anime. Yes, I feel like I talk about Netflix and original anime all the time now. It's practically all I talk about. Anyways, today is a little bit more of an interesting one. Pacific Rim: The Black. Yes, it's called The Black. Is an episodic sequel series and or just a series in the same universe as the Pacific Rim franchise, if you will, that started back in 2013, ended practically in 2017, and then they decided to make an anime in 2018. Now, here's what's fascinating to me personally. It might only be interesting to me, but on the surface, this show just kind of seems like your typical Japanese anime, even though it's 3D CGI. But okay, fine, it's 3D CGI from a Netflix original anime, which it's fair to say we've come to expect that at least a couple times a year now. However, the actual creators and writers of this show are Craig Kyle and Greg Johnson, both of which have worked in tons of American cinema. Thor Ragnarok, I believe one of them worked on as well. And the directors of the series of Pacific Rim: The Black was Jae Hong Kim and Hiroyuki Hayashi. Also involved with the project, besides Legendary Pictures and Netflix, was the Tokyo-based animation company. This is going to be a really just out there Japanese name, so excuse me. Polygon Pictures also co-produced the series, and they actually were at the helm of the animation using a certain program, which we all know it's bullshit. So yeah, this is an American/Japanese production. Really, really interesting for a multitude of reasons. Number one, I've never seen something like this before, except for maybe like big movies, maybe like a Ghibli film, although that's not really /American productions, but you guys know what I mean. So yeah, it's an American/Japanese production. It has an English cast, and it also has a Japanese cast as well, both of which are the main way to watch the series. I don't know. I tried looking it up. I wanted to see which is the series, or how do they intend you to watch the series. Do they intend to watch it in Japanese, in English? Did not find any information, although I did realize that on the North American Netflix, or I don't think it's just, maybe it's just the US, or I don't know. I'm not sure if Canada and the US share the same Netflix. Either way, it only had English from what I could see. In terms of voices. So maybe they intend for you to watch this in English, although in Japan you can watch it in Japanese, and in various other places you can watch it in Japanese. So really, this is going to be the first time I say this. I actually watched both of these in both languages, back to back, in fact. Each episode I just kept watching in Japanese and English for the curiosity's sake. I wanted to see in both ways, because really I wanted to have the most diverse look at this as possible. Anyway, getting on with the actual review, let's get to that story summary, and then we'll discuss everything afterwards. There was a time when Kaiju rose from the Pacific Rim, only to encounter giant robots known as Jaegers, built to fight them back. That time has passed now, unfortunately. Now, Australia has become overrun by Kaiju, forcing the evacuation of an entire continent. Left behind, teenagers siblings Taylor and Haley embark on a desperate search for their missing parents, teaching themselves to pilot a battle-longed abandoned Jaeger to help in their quest and give them even the slightest bit of hope of surviving. That is the best description. Basically, Australia was abandoned and two kids are trying to find their parents. That's pretty much the basics. The starring cast of Japan and US voice actors are Yui Shimodaya or Gideon Adlon as Haley Travis, Yusuke Kobayashi or Colin Worthy as Taylor Travis, Iku Minase or Erica Limbeck as Lao or Loa, something like that. The Jaeger AI, alright, just the Jaeger AI. Ayaka Shimoyamanda or Victoria Grace as May, finally. Lastly, there's also Boy. His name's just Boy. That's another main member of the cast. I don't know the voice actor, actually. I was reading the cast. I thought, did I forget somebody important? Realized, okay, Boy. So I don't know the voice actors of Boy, but he doesn't speak in the show anyway, so I don't think it matters. Okay, so Netflix original series Pacific Rim: The Black. I actually made fun of the title quite a bit before it was coming out. I thought it sounded kind of weird, The Black. Now watching the show, it makes sense why it's called The Black. And yeah, so I don't have any complaints about the title. I had a whole gimmick that I was going to open up this episode, if you will. Missed opportunities aside, in terms of my jokes, that is, how are the story and the characters of Pacific Rim The Black? Now, I honestly had no hope for this show. I had no hope. I did not think it was going to be good. After all, the first Pacific Rim, let's go back a little bit. The first Pacific Rim, it's a pretty good film. It's got great action, great visuals, good direction, a well structure. It has a good structure of a plot, but the story suffers from horrible character development, bad dialogue, and numerous other problems that just really oh god, it is so hard to... well, you know what, granted, it's not that hard to watch the movie because there are some good characters, but for the most part, they really did not do a great job. But world building, the overall story of what's going on, the Jaegers existing, the Kaiju, really interesting. Even if the Jaegers are not the coolest design mechs I've ever seen, and the Kaiju are just kind of generic, but whatever. Cut to 5 years later, China gets in on this whole ordeal. Pacific Rim Uprising finally releases, and you can definitely see some bias stuff, which, you know, I will be, like, even though I am always against meddling with or censorship and stuff like that when it comes to, you know, Chinese studios. I will admit, though, considering China did save Pacific Rim, fair enough that they want to put in as much Chinese elements in it. You know, honestly, that is fair enough. China did save the first movie, so. But either way, Pacific Rim Uprising was a horrible film. It was a huge step down. Everything about it was just bad. The effects, while updated, still didn't look better because it just wasn't stylized and it just didn't look very pretty. All the old characters are gone. The characters are like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That's not what I was thinking of. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, you know, stuff like that. But yeah, it was really bad. I did a whole review on it back in the day, and I did not like the film. It was really horrible. And after that, I had no hope for Pacific Rim. I had no idea that they were going to bring it back in any way, shape, or form. I mean, back in 2013, I remember, or 2014, I believe, I remember we all said, like, just give it to Japan. Japan will probably do something more interesting with it. And I guess they somewhat listened. They gave it to a Japanese studio to animate and/or cast Japanese actors, but they also had Americans write it. But anyways, that being said, how does this fare compared to those? To not beat around the bush and just give a straight answer, I think this is much better than any Pacific Rim thing I've ever seen. Like, and I am not joking. I'm not joking. This show was actually engaging. It was actually interesting. The characters were actually likable, and it made sense. And watching it was just a huge surprise. I did not expect that. Now, I have not seen extended lore of Pacific Rim. I gotta be straight up with you. I have not seen anything on Pacific Rim other than the movies, and then there was like one comic book back in the day that I glanced over, but overall, I'm not familiar with the lore of Pacific Rim. I just know the first two movies, and that's it. And based on the first two movies, I kind of like the world in the first film, although the story just kind of suffers. Second film, I already explained, the story sucks. This, they actually took their time with. The whole setting of this story kind of just takes place in Australia, the outback of Australia, during The Black, when everything went dark because kaijus overran the area and they just kind of abandoned Australia, whatever reason. Now, how does the rest of the world fare? I have no clue. I don't know anything outside. What is going on outside? I guess people just left Australia abandoned completely. Which sounds like a bad idea, but, you know, whatever. For the story, it made sense. I really enjoyed it, pretty much. I really enjoyed the story. The main two characters, Haley and Taylor, were just, is that his name, actually? Let me be clear. Hang on. Okay, yeah, his name's Taylor. I don't know what, I thought it was going to be Travis, but no, Travis is the last name. So yeah, Haley and Taylor, they're these brother and sister. Their parents were Jaeger pilots. They dropped them off in this canyon to stay safe from the kaiju and all that. And 5 years later, parents didn't show up. They find a missing Jaeger with an AI in it called Lao, And then they try to go on an adventure to try to save or find their parents, rather. Solve the mystery. What happened? What's going on? The brother-sister dynamic, the sibling dynamic, was actually really, really well done. I was completely enthralled with it. I was like, oh god, this is actually pretty decent. A lot better than the last two movies, which didn't really have any kind of dynamic with characters. The characters it never felt like they had anything really with each other. It never felt like they had a connection. I mean, the best ones being, Mako and Raleigh, if you will, but I never felt a connection between the two, other than I guess they fought the longest with each other, but other than that, I never found them particularly, interesting. Here, Taylor and Haley actually have character, they have motivation, they have personalities, and I really like them for that. On top of that, just the world in general, how it reacted to Australia, I mean, it's more interesting, and it makes sense that, okay, Australia is done, let's just destroy all the satellites, it's going black, we're done with Australia. On a side note, I will say, though, I do find it absolutely hilarious how there's barely any Australian actors in the English version. In the Japanese, voice acting, it's fine completely. I mean, it's Japanese. But in the English version, I would have expected to hear more Australians. No, there is none. But that's not so much a complaint, just an interesting thing. Now, the story did have some twists and turns. It has some surprises, some groups of humans, Australians, that they come across and they have to deal with. One of them being Shane, which is the leader of a pact, and he has a so-called rescued daughter, if you will. That's not really his daughter, named May, who's the other one of the main characters in the show. Yeah, they were pretty interesting as well. And then you have the Jaeger, which, by the way, the Jaeger in this one actually has a personality. The personality, it's a cadet, not prototype, but training Jaeger. And the AI is named Lao, or Loa, or whatever. She's actually pretty entertaining. She had a personality, unlike the other movies where the Jaegers are just kind of big machines. No, here they have a personality, which can, distinguish them enough from Evangelion. If people are still, if you guys remember that back in the day, they used to say it was a big copycat of Evangelion, Pacific Rim was, even though it's not, but whatever. So yeah, now Lala or whatever is this AI inside the Jaeger and is always talking to them. She was actually pretty entertaining. Definitely the comic relief. Although they don't go overboard with her, thankfully. I thought she was going to get annoying at some point, but she never did. She was very useful. Had a few quips here and there, which, she's an AI. There are some times where it's inappropriate, where I was just like, okay, quit with the jokes. We're in trouble. There's this giant kaiju that's about to destroy us. We don't need a joke. Just tell me. All right, tell me straight up. We don't have weapons. That was one. There's a few moments like that. A little issue I do have with the show, or with season 1 at least, is that there is a lot of mystery, a lot of promising of, oh, we'll get to that later. Which, okay, yes, this is a series. I guess they weren't banking on it, or they are banking on it on being successful, because if they didn't, they would have explained everything already. But there's kind of a mystery going on with the boy, which I'm not going to spoil. There's a mystery going on with Lawa, which, I won't spoil. There's a little bit of a mystery going on with May. There's a mystery about the boy and girl's parents, like where they were or whatever. And then at the very end, it ends with a massive cliffhanger, like no conclusion at all. And it just kind of sets up more things. And it's like, okay, that's really unsatisfying. Don't get me wrong, it's fine if you want to, allude, alright, next year or whatever, season 2's coming out, be excited and whatnot. But if there's no conclusion to the show, it's a little frustrating. I guess you could say there is a conclusion, and it has to deal with the main kaiju named Copperhead, which by far has some of the most personality and or character in the series. Most of the time, the kaijus are just kind of generic, just monsters that have boring creature designs at least. Here, though, Copperhead is actually, while not a particularly interesting design, he does have at least a connection to the main characters in some way. So there is that, but I don't know. I found the show very good. I found the characters interesting. I was very much invested. I wanted to get to the end. And then when I got there, I just wasn't satisfied with the ending. I wish I could have seen more, which that is both a criticism but also a compliment, because at the end of the day, I wanted to see more. I was invested. I want to know what's going on. So, I mean, that's all great and stuff. In terms of everything else, I really don't have much more to say. Honestly, not a lot happens in this series. So yeah, that's all I have to say about the story and characters. They were all good. They worked just as intended. I was invested personally, and it was an enjoyable watch in terms of that. Now comes time for the presentation of the show, starting with the animation. Now, oh gosh, I am so tired of watching 3D CGI animation. I am so done with it. Well, not animation, anime. It just barely does it work. Barely. Very rarely do we get a Lupin, you know? Very rarely do we get a Lupin. But my gosh, are they just insisting. Now, this one, I think I've said this for a few years now, ever since Ultraman, which I watched so long ago at this point. It has gotten better since then. The 3D animation has gotten better. And this, yes, this looks, I think the last one I watched was Ghost in the Shell. This one looks much better than Ghost in the Shell. It looks pretty nice, I would say. It looks pretty good. The character designs are great. Actually, I would actually go as far to say that the character designs are much better than Ghost in the Shell, which Ghost in the Shell I didn't really like the character designs. Here, yeah, the animations, it's there. It works. If there's one complaint, like a serious complaint I have with this, though, is they never, and I mean never, show any damage. You have these massive kaiju and Jaegers just duking it out, and you never see damage, ever. Like, it's so rare. Like, usually what happens is they'll have smoke cover everything, and then they might show a little bit of damage. But other than that, they don't show, like, footprints. They don't show, like, debris going everywhere because of these giant things fighting. That is extremely disappointing, and something that I wish they could just fix that in these 3D animation shows, because it gets so annoying that I see, especially a Jaeger and a Kaiju are fighting in a big, you know, kind of abandoned city, but there's buildings everywhere, and I'm just thinking to myself, destroy them, destroy some buildings, have this be more exciting. But no, they refuse. They refuse. They only be on the they only show up on the road. They fight on the street, which is huge. It's wide and enough to hold a kaiju and a freaking Jaeger. And they'll just be fighting. They'll be toppling over, and there's no damage to the street. None. No footprints. So that is extremely frustrating. I wish they would fix that already, or at least try to fix that. In 2D animation, most of the time they'll do that, and it looks great. Even in the movies, they'll do that. Pacific Rim, what's it called? The first one. They did that, and it was one of the coolest parts about it. Here, they don't even bother, and it was just kind of frustrating at one point. Other than that, I have no complaints over the animation, other than what I've said before. I'm not a big fan of it, personally. It doesn't look terrible here. It's very smooth, I'll give it that. It's very smooth, and it looks appropriate. So that's what I can say about that. And by far, Lawa is the coolest Jaeger in the series, just by having personality. So yeah, that's all I have to say about the animation department. In terms of the music is uninspired, not particularly memorable. The opening was okay. It was not your typical Japanese opening. It felt very much American, and I mean extremely American. It feels like a Walking Dead situation, like a Game of Thrones situation. That's kind of what it felt like to me, and what it sounded like. Nothing particularly interesting in the music department. I really wish they would have just gotten a Japanese team to just have the music done for that, but, you know, whatever. It doesn't matter. Yeah, so that's all I have to say about the music and the animation. Was it stellar? No. Was it bad? No. Was it okay? Yeah, it was slightly above average. I enjoyed it. You know, I never had a problem with it, I'll put it that way. Overall, how did Pacific Rim The Black fare? I have to say, it was a worthwhile experience. Even though there were things that did frustrate me about the series, mainly in the presentation department. That's where I got the most frustration. Even with that being said, I enjoyed the show quite a bit. Now there are plenty of things I would rather see in terms of a Pacific Rim kind of deal. I really have always said that I would like the series to go to Japan, and like, I mean, obviously don't copy Evangelion, because that would be just horrible, and I think that's one of the biggest reasons why they haven't gone to Japan, so then they don't risk any, kind of say like, oh, you're copying Evangelion, but whatever. I just think Japan would be a more interesting location for this. I think it would have been cool if they just gave it off to a Japanese studio and said like, hey, just do whatever you want, and like a 2D animation studio, by the way. I'm not just saying a 3D animation. But yeah, other than that, even though they won't do that, that's fine with me. Honestly, Pacific Rim: The Black is very promising. It has a good start so far, and I am interested to see what else they have to do. Overall, this was a solid experience. I'd have to say this is definitely the best Pacific Rim thing I've seen. I mean, the first movie will always, like, I'll be nostalgic for it because of, everything that happened, and it still has some of the coolest action in a big blockbuster Hollywood movie in terms of giant monsters fighting giant robots. I think it's the only one, really. But yeah, so still there. I'll always hate Pacific Rim Uprising. Pacific Rim The Black, though, this is really where the series is doing. I think it's going to go somewhere. I think it's going to be really good. Do I think it's going to be break out and become a huge franchise? No, I honestly don't. I still think Pacific Rim is going to be niche. Only a few people will remember Pacific Rim. I mean, even I barely remember Pacific Rim sometimes, but yeah, so that's my review. My final verdict on Pacific Rim The Black is a very solid 8 out of 10. It's a great show. I suggest you guys watch it if you have Netflix, or if you're at least interested in Pacific Rim. I suggest you guys go watch it. One thing I failed to mention, what do I prefer, the English or the Japanese version of the show? I will be 100% honest and say that both are really, really good. And that if you want to watch this show in English, honestly, I would say go for it. It works very well. If you want to watch it in Japanese, you already know what you're kind of getting into. It is really good, don't get me wrong, but I was really surprised with the English. The English voice acting was great. I have a feeling that's what they focused on, considering it's more of a American production, if you will. So either way, it's a good to watch it either or. I don't have a definite opinion, although I will say, if you're using the North American Netflix, you will not be able to watch it in Japanese, at least from the last I saw, you couldn't. But yeah, that's my opinion on that. Anyways, what do you guys think of Pacific Rim? Have you seen it? Do you love it, hate it, don't care about it, you're mad at me for even mentioning it? Leave it down in the comments down below. I always love hearing your guys' thoughts. Please tell me what you guys think. Do you think Pacific Rim will die very soon? Or do you think it will succeed and become a massive franchise like Fate or Demon Slayer? Speak of Demon Slayer. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. I know this was not your Jujutsu Kaisen, which I do plan on talking about at one point. Don't worry about that. But this was an interesting anime to check out. I will be back talking about more traditional Japanese anime very soon, as well as some cool American films that will be coming out very soon as well. So I will talk about those. Maybe some Japanese films as well. Anyways, thank you guys so much for your continued support. Thank you guys for everything. I'm sorry we have not been making as much content as much as we'd like anyways, but we are trying our best. Until next time, I'm Grant for One Pair Review. As always, have a nice day.